Well, why? I'm exhausted. But I'm also full of energy. I'm exhausted because I just spent the entire day at Comic Con. Not like the Comic Con, our local Comic Con, which is great that we have one now. It's been what? Maybe 7 years or something like that? 8? Something like that. But I'm full of energy because, boy, what a Comic Con it was. I got to meet a few people I really wanted to meet, and the experience was better than I wanted. My son and I got everything out of the experience that we wanted. I said, hey, son, you want to go to Comic Con? He said, yes. I said, why? He said, we have to find some custom Sonic the Hedgehog Lego minifigs, which we did. He ended up getting 9 custom minifigs, and I picked 2. I got a Predator because it was cool because you take his mask off and he had his Predator face. So I was like, there you go. And then I got a Moff Gideon because he had a really cool cape that was not like cloth, it was plastic. And he came with a dark saber that was shaped like the dark saber, like Lego should do. Make a dark saber with a different hilt because it's different shape than the lightsabers. It's not round, it's a blade. So I was like, thanks for making that, dude. I'll take it. Anywho, my son was thrilled. He got to meet Bruno from Miss Marvel, and he got to meet the voice actor who does some voices that he's a big fan of, including one of the characters on his new favorite show, Amphibia? So my son had a blast. I had a blast. Mainly because our specific Comic-Con, I've had this experience many times that I've gone. We go on Friday because I have my son on Friday and I work on the weekends. So we just go on Friday. But when you go on Friday, first thing, right when they open, then like nobody's there. We walked up. We didn't have to stand in line for anything, whether it was drinks, food. I mean, maybe, give or take, we would have to wait a second for the person in front of us. But that was only a couple of times. For the most part, we didn't have to wait for line for anything. Not food. We didn't get any food. Not drinks. I got one drink. The celebrities I met, I had to wait for a second for 2 of them, and the other 3 were like nothing. I walked right up to the table and started talking to them. I was a big fan. There was a gentleman from American Gods. I got to like just tell him, "You're amazing. I loved you in that show." You know, the guy who was also the Doctor in Mandalorian. I should know the actor's name, but I don't. But I just wanted to tell him you were great in American Gods, and he seemed very appreciative. But first and foremost, I went up to Bonnie Pace. 20 years ago, I went to the second Star Wars celebration in Indianapolis. That's right, number 2, the second ever. I went to the first and second Star Wars celebrations ever. So when people talk about them now, I'm like, whatever. It's too much now. But back then, it was special. Anyway, at the second Star Wars celebration back in 2002, the lovely actress Bonnie Pace, who plays Aunt Beru in the prequel trilogy, was there, and I developed a huge crush on her because I saw her on stage. She was there with Joel Edgerton. At the time, Joel Edgerton was a nobody, and now I'm thrilled that I got to see Joel Edgerton on stage. However, I developed a huge crush on this very pretty young lady who was playing Aunt Beru, and she mentioned that she sings, and she sang a little bit on stage, and it stuck with me. So knowing that she was going to be there this year, especially now that it's funny that she has 1 word of dialogue in the prequel trilogy. Hello. But in Kenobi, she had a whole episode of being a freaking badass and kicking butt with a sawed off. So I was telling her about that. I was very thrilled to meet her. And I told her how I remember seeing you at the second Star Wars celebration 20 years ago. This is a crazy experience for me. And she's like, oh man, that was crazy. I remember that. Like, yeah, so my son and I got to meet. They had a package deal. So I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll take a picture. I'll take the selfie and I'll take the autograph. So I got this lovely autograph from Bonnie Pace. And I'm very appreciative. This was like the very first photo. I believe this is like their costume fitting. But I remember this being the very first photo we saw back when they were filming Attack of the Clones, when they announced that she was cast as Beru. So when I saw this particular photo, I was like, I want that photo, because I remember that photo. I remember being like, ooh, Aunt Beru's pretty. It's funny, I was thinking of after her appearance at the end of Kenobi, it's like no wonder in A New Hope the stormtroopers burned their house down. They knew that she was going to throw down and wipe them all out if they didn't do something drastic. So meeting her was such a pleasure. And then it was funny, we were going through the Funko Pops later, because they're everywhere, but there was a bunch of Funko Pops right across from her too. And I thought about it, and I walked by her, and I went up to her again, and I said, you know, Beru needs a Funko Pop. How come Beru doesn't have a Funko Pop? And she looked at me dead stare and said, what's a Funko Pop? I thought that was hilarious. I mean, who doesn't know what a Funko Pop is? Sure, we're not all huge fans of them, but everybody knows what it is. That's like saying, what's Lego? Like, it's a worldwide phenomenon. So I thought that was hilarious. She didn't know what a Funko Pop is. It was the volunteer that was working with her that was like, you know, those vinyl figures. And she's, the bubbleheads. That's what she said. Oh, the bubbleheads. It was great. It was great. So then later, I got to meet someone else who was a pioneer of filmmaking, who was doing mocap before there was mocap. There would be no Thanos without this gentleman. I told him this. I said there would be no Thanos. There would be no Gollum without this gentleman. And I was just thrilled that he's doing the circuit now after having all those years of horrible people saying horrible things about him because he played a fantastic character that some people don't like for some reason. It's weird because it's just a character in a kid's movie. But I told him how appreciative I was and how I quote Jar Jar every single day. Yeah, that's right, I'm talking about Ahmed Best. And I said, I quote Jar Jar every single day. And he goes, me too. I don't know if he was joking as in because I'm Jar Jar, everything I say is quoting Jar Jar, or if he was like, because then he started like murmuring under his breath, like the Jar Jar voice. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And that's when my son was like, will you do the voice? And I'm like, we're not going to request, he's not, dance, monkey, dance. So he didn't, and he honestly seemed, because he didn't, he was like, yeah, let's not do the voice. Thanks. So he seemed to be there more for business. So did Bonnie. But she deserved more love. And Ahmed actually had a little bit of a line, which was wonderful. But he was all smiles. Took a great picture with my son and I. It was great to just thank him for changing film history. Without him, like seriously, we wouldn't have Gollum and Thanos and all the great mocap and CG work we have today if it wasn't for what he did, 23, 24 years ago. Which is why I chose this picture, because that's the Ahmed Best I knew. I wanted that. This is the OG mocap suit before it was gray spandex and dot markers and all that. It was just a guy who had to make sure that you had the eye line right, and then they'll fix it in post. There's a couple shots where you have those arms in the movie, but meeting Jar Jar himself, Ahmed Best, was an honor. I'm a big fan of Jar Jar. He's a wonderful character that you're supposed to enjoy the other characters not liking. Because, Star Wars is a kid's movie. It cracks me up when people complain or nitpick or get all rant and raving about Star Wars or anything regarding Star Wars, because it's a kid's movie. It's great that adults can like it too, and that we take it so seriously, but it's a kid's movie. That would be like nitpicking and judging and ridiculing the Care Bears movie. You'd sound like an idiot. Guess what? People who go, Star Wars is stupid and ridiculous and are idiots, because it's a kid's movie. I love Rise of Skywalker. I do. Rise of Skywalker is my third favorite Star Wars movie. Yeah, I said it. And it's funny because when I get all the compliments on my t-shirt, I know it's people who don't like that movie complimenting my t-shirt. But I wear this t-shirt because I love this movie. I love this line. And who cares? It's just a movie. Anywho, it was an honor to meet him. So on top of all that, There was another individual who co-starred in one of my favorite movies of all time. I personally believe it is Arnold Schwarzenegger's best movie. Yes, I believe it's Arnold Schwarzenegger's best movie. I believe it is James Cameron's best movie. Yeah, I think True Lies is James Cameron's best movie. So I brought my ice cube tray and I was going to have him sign it. Bear with me. If you know, you know. And then, of course, it was, oh, it cost extra to have them sign something of yours. And I was like, you know what? I don't even need it because I noticed that they had, I mean, he had a lot of pictures to choose from. He's been in so many great things. He even had the picture of the cowboy in the stall from Austin Powers, which I would have gotten if he didn't have this. But he literally had the picture, because I just watched the scene before I left, of the exact moment when he says this line. One of my favorite lines in movie history. What kind of a sick bitch takes the ice cube trays out of the freezer? So I start telling that to his handler, you know, the lady I'm paying, and I'm picking my picture. And I was like, no, I'll take that picture. Because that's the exact moment when he says that line. She's like, really? That's good to know. I'm like, no, seriously, that's exactly when he says the line. So yeah, know that that's what that's a picture of. And then I go to get it signed, and Tom Arnold gives me the greatest freaking story. He goes, you know, that's a true story. And I was literally hoping, like, earlier in the day, I was like, man, I'm going to bring that up to him, and I hope he says something like, that line was improvised. And I'm going to be like, oh, you improvised one of my favorite lines in movie history. But he goes on to tell me that that's a true story. I said, what? Like, I was on the edge of, I would say seat, but I was standing. Like, I was like on cloud 9 when he's telling me this, because I couldn't believe that I was getting like interview gold, pretty much. Like, I got the scoop. He says, that's a true story. I said, really? And he didn't have to drop any names. Oh, but boy, he did. He said, Arnold and I were making a lot of smoothies. So we bought a ton of ice cube trays for all the ice to put in the blender for the smoothies. Him and Arnold having smoothies. Great story already. And then he tells me about his second divorce and goes on to say, one night, Roseanne's people come in the house and take everything. But what bothered him was the little things that were just to stick it to him. He said, obviously they took all the ice cube trays out of the freezer, but they also took the batteries out of all the remotes. Not the remotes, but specifically all the batteries out of all of his remote controls. I'm like, that's cold-blooded, dude. He's like, it was ridiculous. I was like, this is the greatest story ever. So then he says he's telling this story the next day on the set of True Lies in the makeup trailer. And James Cameron overhears it and says, put that line in the movie. I'm like, dude, you're giving me gold here. So he signs this picture. This is the exact moment that he says that line in the movie. You know, hey man, welcome to the club. My second wife? And it really was his second divorce with Roseanne. Roseanne was the one who took his ice cube trays from the freezer. So I got his autograph. He tells me this. I get my picture with him. He shakes my hand. And I was like, dude, luckily my divorce was a cakewalk. And he rolled his eyes and went, I've been divorced 4 times. I said, man, thank you so much. I'm such a huge fan of your work. And he seemed very appreciative. And it's great when you show them how much you appreciate them. When they reciprocate, like, you can tell that they genuinely feel good. That you feel good and that you're, like, it's a mutual, you know, they like hearing it as much as I need to say it. So that just made my whole day. I was on cloud 9. I was walking around the rest of the place like huge grin on my face after that. Not that I wasn't already after meeting Bonnie. I mean, come on, I had such a crush on her. She was one of my earlier crushes. Now I've met my first crush, Amy Jo. I mean, come on, this is getting out of hand. So then, just for kicks, I wanted to say hello to a couple of Clerks. As a completionist, yes, I wanted to meet them both because I'd already met Brian. I hadn't met the gentleman who plays Randall. But they were both there this time. And the reason I met Brian was 4 years ago I volunteered at my local Comic-Con. Great experience. I ended up in charge of Jason David Frank's line. most of the time, which was crazy because I was a huge Power Rangers fan. And my son and I had already met Jason David Frank a couple of times. Oh, wonderful, wonderful man to his fans. Oh, nicest guy in the world to his fans. It was interesting as a volunteer interacting with him. He's kind of different to not his fans. So, yeah, that was interesting to get both behind the curtain and in front. He didn't seem to care as much about his, the volunteers. Anyway, but later that year, at the very end, I was called like an emergency. Someone had to go home, so I needed to fill in their spot, and it ended up being the handler, the person who deals with their cash, for Brian something. Sorry, these should be household names, but from Clerks. And I had just been laid off a job, and this was the nicest guy in the world. He was giving me all kinds. He was conversing, like they specifically tell you, don't talk to them unless they talk to you, kind of thing. Don't bother the celebs by me. Just sit there. If they interact with you, great. He was talking to me the whole time. He was telling me stories about the Clerks animated show and where this was going to go, where that was going to go. He was giving me inside scoop about Clerks 3, which I believe was changed quite a bit because of Kevin's heart attack, which is why the plot is what it is now, but that's not what it was 4 years ago. He was giving me all kinds of scoop, and he was just the nicest guy in the world. And he gave me advice after I told, he's like, what do you do? And I'm like, well, I just kind of lost my job. And he gave me some advice, and I took some of that advice, and I ended up with a way better job, and I'm happier than ever. So I wanted to tell him that, and I did. I said, hey, man, I told him all of that. I said, I showed him, because he's charging money for pictures. But when I was a volunteer, when we were leaving, he's like, hey, you want to get a picture? I ended up getting a picture with him. It's a great experience. So I wanted to tell him that, and I told him all of that. I said, man, I was a volunteer. I had a great experience. You changed my life. I was a huge fan of you as an actor, and now I'm a huge fan of you as a person, because what you did had a huge impact on me, and it meant a lot, and you were so kind to me, and I just really, really thank you for that. And he, very sincerely, was taken aback and like, thank you so much for your kind words. That really means a lot. He shakes my hand. The other guy shook my hand too. I thanked him for coming. He said, no, I should thank you for coming. I said, no. Thank you for coming, because if you weren't here, I wouldn't be here. And he said, oh, okay, well, thank you. Both great guys. So now, I have both their autographs. And since I already have a picture with him, if he comes back around, I'll get a picture with him. But I was glad I got to thank him for all the wonderful things he did for me 4 years ago. And now I have both their autographs. There's only one return, and it's not of the king, it's of the Jedi. That's what he put. And of course he put, I'm not even supposed to be here today. I told him, I was like, oh yeah, I'm a manager at a movie theater. We'll do, because then I brought up that he was telling me about the cartoon, and he goes, yeah, the suits want to bring the cartoon back, but it's all going to depend on the box office of Clerks 3. I'm like, well, then I'll spread the word. I'll do my part. I was like, as a manager of a movie theater, I'm going to do my part to make sure everybody sees that movie. And he's like, oh, are you guys getting the Fathom event? I'm like, no, we never get those. And he's like, man, I was like, yeah, but I'll do what I can. Good luck. We're all pulling for it. We can't wait for the movie. And that's when Randall was like, oh, well, hopefully I'll be here next year, because if you guys don't like the movie, then I won't be. So great guys. Like, these are people that interact with their fans, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful experience. So it was cool to see him again and meet his partner in crime, who was pretty much going to take the Kevin Smith role, since Clerks 3 is about him having a heart attack and then deciding he wants to do something else with his life. Gee, I wonder where that inspiration came from. Anyway, so Comic-Con was a huge success, a blast, and I got to meet exactly who I wanted to meet. And that story I got from Tom Arnold, oh, I couldn't have asked for anything more. Like, I was literally just wanted some little inside, like, I improvised that line. But for him to say that was a true story and then tell me the whole story with the name drops? Been married 4 times. He could have just said X. No, he straight up said Roseanne. Roseanne is the same bitch who stole the ice cube trays out of his freezer. True Lies is one of my favorite movies of all time. And now I have stories to go along with this autograph and a picture with the guy. Look. Since I'm doing it this way, why not? It's really tacky, I know, but why not? I'm excited. I want to share my excitement. Because let me tell you a little story. That's Bonnie Pace, aka Aunt Beru from episode 2, 3, and Kenobi. I mean, come on now. And then we've got, come on now. Look at this. The pioneer of motion capture. The OG. The man himself. Mr. Jar Jar Binks, Ahmed Best. His plane landed right when Comic-Con started, so we got that. I know this is a really dumb idea and really tacky. But come on. It's Tom Arnold. I met him. Great, fantastic experience. And luckily Jason David Frank wasn't there today. He's only there Saturday and Sunday. And I'm like, good riddance. He probably won't show up if there's not enough people in his line. Yeah, true story. He doesn't come out unless there's enough people in his line because he has to Instagram how many people are in his line. And then he left early. I could go on and on about how he's not as awesome as you might think he is when you meet. Because yes, he's awesome to his fans. But behind the scenes, he's just milking his 15 minutes. And boy, I have never seen anyone milk their 15 minutes that much. Because he makes a lot of money at these Comic-Cons. Anywho, apparently that's what my phone was doing earlier. I gotta have my son call his mother. But Comic-Con 2022, it was great to be back. We missed it last year. 2 years ago there wasn't one because the world was closed. So last year was the first time we missed it. But it was great to be back. I can't wait to go next year. These people that I met were great, great people. So kind to both me and my son. And that Tom Arnold story. I don't know how many times. Maybe he tells that story every day. Who knows? But I've never heard that story. And considering that's one of my favorite lines in movie history, you'd think somewhere around the line, oh, that was actually a true story? But Tom Arnold himself told me the whole story. Okie dokie.